The Northtown News Magazine is brought to you in part by the Chicago Police Memorial Foundation, caring for the families of slain and seriously injured officers.
I'm Marty Levinson, and you're watching Northtown News Magazine.
Edward Scissorhands has nothing on me. Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
For the identity of the real Marty Levinson, please stay tuned to the Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that lemon light city, sweet home Chicago. 224 446. Come on, baby, now get your business fixed. Come on. Honey, don't you wanna go back to the lemon light?
Hey there, I am really Marty Levinson. Don't let anybody fool you. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine show with the greatest cameraman around, Sonny Hirsch, and your host, Avi Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Avi Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Don't forget to check all our footage from the Jewish Fest. And, Peter Himmelman was our attraction. And as a matter of fact, this is the second time within a month we've got a Santa Monica resident, somebody who's responsible for two of the best three Marty Levinsons in the history of Marty Levinsons. And that is the editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com, Joe Pollak. Joe,
Nice
how
to
you
meet you.
doing?
Yeah, good to be with you.
My pleasure. Welcome back to Chicago.
Always good to be here.
Definitely. And, you've got an awful lot of fans, and they always represent themselves to me on Facebook when I tell them that you're going to be on the show.
Excellent.
So, in any event, let's get right down to business because we know you're a busy guy. You got family obligations and the whole shot. So, in terms of, tell us about Breitbart first.
We've expanded now. We've got landing pages in several states, Texas, California, expanding to other areas. We've also got Breitbart London, so we're all over the place and getting a lot of traffic, really making waves, especially with the latest story that's been in all the headlines, not just in conservative media, but everywhere, about this border crisis, these unaccompanied minors coming across in the belief that they're going to be able to stay in the United States, even though President Obama himself has said that children who come here unaccompanied are going to be sent back. We haven't seen them being sent back. We've been seeing them bust around to other places in the meantime, but that's been a big story, and we broke that at Breitbart News with the leak of photographs from Border Patrol facilities where these kids were being warehoused, essentially, in really unsanitary and crowded conditions. And so there needs to be some kind of temporary solution for these kids, as well as a long-term solution which involves really securing the border and making it clear to people there's not going to be some kind of amnesty if you get your kids here first. So that's part of the policy debate we have to have. But in the meantime, this border crisis is something that Breitbart News broke, and several websites have given us credit. San Francisco Chronicle newspaper gave us credit for breaking it. So I'd say in the time I've been there, it's probably one of the top 5 stories we've done. So that's happening and really driving national debate. And again, not just in the conservative media, not just talking about what's happening in the Tea Party and so forth, which is important, but also talking about major national news. So we've been doing a lot of Breitbart, keeping ourselves busy.
Yeah, Charles Krauthammer made a very good point the other day. When he was talking about defense, and one of the things he had to say when, Obama and company will say, well, what good is a fence going to do? And the first point he made was, and how come there's a fence around the White House?
Right.
And secondarily, that, since they put the fence in Israel, 99% of the terrorism is stopped.
Right. Well, the fences in Israel are very different. They integrate a physical barrier with technological tools to track movement. And some of those tools are very low tech. I mean, by the security barrier in the West Bank, for example, they have a dirt track, which is raked over and smoothed over on a regular basis, that makes it impossible to cross that fence without leaving footprints. So the patrols that go by that fence are able to see, very low tech, just pure observation, where there are tracks, where there have been infiltrations. There's also electronic sensors on top of that fence, and they have various other means of keeping track of what's happening at the fence. In several parts of our border with Mexico, we have a fence that's a physical barrier, but it's easily surmountable if you have a ladder, if you're willing to climb over. There are lots of holes in the fence. We've gone to gaps in the fence and literally filled these gaps, which are supposedly closed by some kind of a bar that's been left there to block vehicle traffic. But if you're not traveling in a vehicle, you just walk over the bar and you're in the United States. So there's a lot that could be done on our border, and I actually have put this to Republican legislators and said, well, why don't you propose a means of building a fence? If Israel can do it, why can't the United States? And they said, well, Israel is a small country, has a small border. But actually, if you add up all the border that Israel actually has to secure, you're not talking about an order of magnitude different from the United States. The United States is also a much wealthier country and can afford to build a boundary, to build a barrier that will keep illegal immigrants out, as well as drug smugglers, cartels, sex traffickers. These are all the kinds of people who are using the porous nature of the American border to traffic in people, guns, drugs, and all these sorts of things that keep the civil war fueling in Mexico, which is really what it is along the border there, and that keep all this misery from, keep the misery flowing into our borders. And it's not an insurmountable policy disaster. I mean, you know, as the cliche goes, we sent a man to the moon, why can't we build a fence? So there you go.
No, definitely, and there's a lot of different ways to build the fence too. So, and there are much more secure ways. And the fact is, that when they put the fence in San Diego, which successfully stopped the traffic coming in over the border there, that's what opened up Arizona.
Right, and you need to have a comprehensive, across the boundary solution to this. Once you have that fence in place, then you can talk about all kinds of other policy options for the people who are already here illegally. I think a lot of Republicans would say various different things about what they think should be done with people who are here illegally. Some would say deport them, some would say make them citizens, and then you've got a whole range of options in between. But what everybody agrees upon, whether Tea Party or moderate or whatever, is border security comes first. And that's become the consensus position of the Republican Party. It's also the consensus position of Americans. 2/3 of Americans roughly say we should have some kind of path to citizenship for people who are here illegally, don't deport them. But a similar proportion, about 2/3, say border security has to come first. So if you can secure the boundary, you can open up all of these other possibilities. The Democratic Party has an interest in opening the other possibilities before securing the boundary because they believe, perhaps with good reason, that a lot of the people coming across the boundary, if they become citizens, will become Democrats. And there's just a blatant political motive there. And it's not how we should operate when we're concerned about national security. It's not how we should operate when we're concerned about a humanitarian crisis. This impression that there's going to be some kind of amnesty for children is what is partially driving this exodus, as President Obama himself acknowledged recently in an interview with George Stephanopoulos. So there are things we can do, and this is not, you know, xenophobia or bigotry. It's just the basic fundamental duty of a state, of any country, to secure its boundary, to protect its citizens.
You know, we don't have as much time as we'd like because Joe has a very busy family schedule. But a couple of topics I'd like to hit would be Obama and the makeup of the Congress in the coming election.
I think the Republicans will probably take the Senate. Anything can happen until November, but I think it's likely the Republicans will take the Senate. Obama is already a lame duck president. There's literally nothing he can do legislatively. He has absolutely alienated Republicans. He's also starting to alienate Democrats who disagree with him. And this notion that he's going to do everything by executive order is being contradicted by the Supreme Court rulings that say, for example, that his appointments to the National Labor Relations Board were unconstitutional because he said the Senate was in recess when it wasn't.
9-0 vote.
9-0 vote. He has been the loser in these unanimous decisions, I think 13 times in his presidency thus far. And he doesn't seem to care. You know, he made himself out to be a constitutional law scholar, but he doesn't really seem to care about the constraints on power in the Constitution. The thing that he worries about with the Constitution is how limited it is in terms of what it can empower the government to do for the people. But that's not why we wrote a Constitution. The Constitution was written by the Founding Fathers to create a government, but at the same time to restrain it. And he doesn't like restraints on government power, and he keeps saying over and over again, if Congress won't do it, then I will. Well, that's not how the system works. You're supposed to negotiate with Congress. If there's a divided government, as we have now, even though it's only partially divided because there's a split on Capitol Hill, nevertheless, you're supposed to negotiate with the other side, come to some kind of a common resolution. He has no interest in doing that. So I think he's basically done. The race is now on to determine who's going to be the candidate in 2016. The Republicans have no clear frontrunner, and it's not clear that there will be one for quite a long time. Democrats are starting to think about maybe an alternative to Hillary Clinton. She is the clear frontrunner, but she's had such a poor performance in her latest interviews and on her book tour, where she said, for example, that she and Bill Clinton had been dead broke after they left the White House. I mean, it's so ridiculous and so out of touch.
Well, even if they were a couple $100 million in the hole on the books, the fact is, given Clinton's pension, given Mrs. Clinton's pension from the Senate and whatever else, I mean, they're not going starving anytime soon.
They're
Not to
really-
mention the $104 million
Yeah.
in
There's
speeches.
a distinction between insolvent and broke. I mean,
Yeah.
Donald Trump has had businesses go bankrupt, but he's not broke. Sheldon Adelson,
Yeah.
casino magnate, has had to declare bankruptcy in some of his businesses because those particular units of his business were unable to pay their debts. But he is still one of the wealthiest men in the world, and it doesn't mean he's broke. So what she's describing is insolvency. They were
And
insolvent.
funding Birthright Israel, which is a really great thing.
Right. So they were insolvent. They had all these legal debts and so forth. Okay, they weren't broke. They had the pension, as you mentioned. They had her Senate salary coming around. They had book deals, all kinds of stuff. I mean, they did not even come close to fitting the definition of broke. And the really funny thing was, she said it was hard for us to afford our homes, plural homes.
Yeah.
If you can't afford the homes, we'll sell one or two of them. I don't know how many they had, but they had that new mansion, $6 million, I think, in New York, so she could run for Senate. I mean, please. So to say things like that in this climate when Democrats are running on inequality and the 99% versus the 1% really doesn't look good. The Democrats are starting to think, well, is there a liberal alternative? One is Elizabeth Warren, who I know from my days at Harvard Law School. She was a professor when I was a student there.
And a former Republican, actually.
I don't think she's a viable candidate. I don't think she has any executive experience. She's basically sounding liberal themes and so forth, but there's nothing really there in terms of governing substance. The other alternative, I think, is very serious, and Jerry Brown of California, the governor who would be 78 years old when he took office, nevertheless is a very viable candidate. He's been moderately successful in California. He's gotten the electorate to approve tax increases, which have helped him balance the budget. Some of it might have balanced anyway, given the stock market rise, but he has been successful at restraining spending, at restraining his own party. He's kind of the adult in the room when it comes to Democrats in Sacramento. And he is one of those old-time moderate Democrats. When he ran in 1992, he ran on a flat tax. He ran on other sort of pro-business positions, and that's basically how he's governed. He has a few quirks. He still believes in high-speed rail, which is a complete waste of money. But he could be a very viable presidential contender, and I think that given that age is going to be a factor for several candidates, that might neutralize age as a factor for Jerry Brown. So I think he might actually be the most viable contender against Hillary Clinton. He says he has no interest in running. We'll see how long that lasts.
It's interesting. I know
Yeah.
it's something he would like. His father was the governor of California.
That's
before
right. The
him.
Brown family goes back to the 1850s, I think, in California.
Yeah.
They have a long heritage.
It's funny because he's really not a pro-drug person, and he seems like he's flipped out half the time.
Yeah, he is against legalizing marijuana. I mean, there you go. He's got some conservative policies. He said recently he doesn't know how a society functions if everybody is on drugs all the time, which is the reason he's against legalization. By the way, that's a position against the platform of his party. The California Democratic Party is running this year on legalizing marijuana completely to keep pace with Colorado. There's this idea in California that California has to be the most radical. So if some other state does something radical, California can't be left behind. It's got to be cutting edge. So Illinois has different ideas. Illinois has to have the worst finances. It's not good enough that Californians are bad. You got to have them even worse in Illinois. It's always interesting to come back here and see where things are politically. And it looks like Illinois will have some interesting races as well. And I watch your program and I see some of the candidates we've got locally. And I know Bob Dole is here, and he's running up there in the 10th district. So maybe he'll win his seat back. Hopefully this is the year.
I hope so. And there's an awful lot of strong Jewish support for him among the PACs. And it's funny because he's actually running against a Jewish congressman, and I get the press releases from both. And as nice as Brad Schneider sounds, if you take a look at the real meat and potatoes issues and the votes, it's one thing to send a press release supporting Israel or whatever, or any specific cause, but it's more than just the words you see on TV and that soundbite. And there's not the same kind of backbone and substance that Dole presents on the issues.
Dole is a really sensitive guy. He did a fantastic job when he was in Congress for that single term before they redrew his district to make it harder for him to win again. I think he's been great. He's great on Israel. He's great on the economy. He's socially moderate, which I think is what that district wants. Nevertheless, he lost in 2012 in that big wave election on the presidential ticket with Obama at the top and everything. And I think he's got a chance of getting back in, and he's certainly working hard for it. So, he's a friend of mine, and I hope he does well.
We wish him luck, and we hope to have both him and Brad Schneider in studio soon enough. Why don't you give us what you like to say in the minute and a half?
I just hope everyone's doing well. You know, it's interesting to see the economy develop the way it has, and one of the big questions is what's going to happen in the future. There's a lot of pessimism about the economy, even though some of the numbers are looking very good. We've got the stock market going up, we've got unemployment going down, and yet people are very pessimistic. And I think what people are seeing is that more and more people are actually leaving the workforce, and opportunities are actually drying up. And I'd really like to see Chicago, California, all these places that used to drive the American economy get back to where they were. It's something I think about a lot, especially being in the heart of a small, bustling part of California. The rest of California is in serious economic trouble. But where I live, Santa Monica, where Peter Himmelman lives, there's a lot happening. So it kind of gives you a perspective. What grows, what doesn't grow, where the economy is moving and where it's falling behind. And I really just hope things keep picking up around the country, but especially here in Chicago, really badly needed. I mean, you got to get opportunities for people. I just saw a statistic from the Illinois Policy Institute that there's only one job created in Illinois in the last year for every 300 high school seniors. I mean,
Wow.
you just can't sustain that, you know. So I'm hoping that Chicago and Illinois can really turn it around.
Well, I hope so too, because people are moving out of and some of the good people are moving out of state like crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I enjoy reading stuff from the Illinois Policy Institute, among other places. So if people check out Breitbart.com to see all the good stuff that they're putting out. And one of the things I like about Breitbart.com, before you guys tell me it's like they're not objective, whatever else, they're very honest, period, about where they're coming from and what they're doing. And the fact is that, okay, you got to separate opinion from fact when you do the stories. I don't want to make you late. Joel Pollak, check him out on Breitbart.com. Wish we could have had you longer. You're welcome every time you're back in town. Good
to
luck
be
to
here.
you and your
Thank you.
family.
Good luck.
And all the best, Joel.